Welcome to my cafe, my Pet Info Cafe. Pour yourself a warm cup of your favorite and let's chat about our love of animals. I am your host, Jennifer Eileen, and I am so delighted to introduce our topic today, Pet Inclusive Housing in Virginia. Meet our guests who are instrumental in pets and housing, Cheryl Crowe and Jessica Simpson with Humane World for Animals, and Reasa Currier, Fairfax County Animal Shelter, and meet our very special, important pet guest, Sir Charles. So thank you for being here. Welcome. It's so delightful to meet you and talk about this topic. And I do think we need to start with our VIP, our very important pet. Tell us about Sir Charles. Is he related to the king?
He might be.
You know, he's in town.
He might be, yes, yes. So we're not sure if he's royalty or not, but we are treating him like royalty while he is with us at Fairfax County Animal Services. So Sir Charles, and we've been calling him Charlie, is about six years old. Here, Charlie, let's have a little snack. And he's just full of love. He's never met a stranger that we have seen. He loves children, he loves other dogs, and he came to us actually because his family couldn't find housing that supported him. And so we're seeing that as a big challenge for many of the families in Fairfax County, and they're struggling to find housing that allows dogs of his size, allows pets that are of certain breeds. And so he's a wonderful dog, a wonderful family dog, a great companion, and he's available for adoption.
Yes. Well, that's exciting. Oh, bless you. Oh, bless you. Well, he is certainly very friendly. We introduced him to all the camera people. And really, any pet who can kind of come into this environment with, cameras staring at them is really cool. Well, Jessica and Cheryl, I want to pivot and talk about Humane World for Animals. At least you do a lot of legislation in Richmond. So will you just tell us about the organization and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I can sort of kick us off and then pitch it over to Cheryl. So the Humane World for Animals, formerly the Humane Society of the United States, we're a global actually organization. My role is specific to certain subjects. So what we're here to discuss today is something that I specialize in, pet inclusive housing. And as a part of the work that we do to advance more affordable, equitable housing that welcomes all sorts of pets, is to attack it through the policy lens. And so we do that in a variety of different ways, from farm animals to animal testing to companion animals. And then we have amazing colleagues like Cheryl who work at the state level to ensure that those policies are
Sorry
enacted.
about he's playing the drum over here. So I hope you mind it. And then if Jessica looks familiar to my audience, that's because she was in here last year or so talking about the Roscoe's Law and the pets in housing in DC. So it's really exciting to talk about what we're doing here in Virginia.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Absolutely, sure thing. And so I work as our Virginia State Director with Humane World for Animals. So essentially the boots on the ground for the larger organization globally, the representative in the state that is working hand in hand not only with our shelters, volunteers, but also working with our legislators to promote policy relative to the organization's initiatives, and one of which is definitely our pet inclusive housing. So we spend a lot of time in Richmond throughout session and before and after in preparation. But we also serve as the conduit, the link between our community members, our shelters, rescues, and organizations that work directly with animals, so that we can ensure that the policies that we're looking at and the initiatives that we're moving forward have a direct impact on people and their pets in Virginia.
And they certainly do. Well, I love hearing more about Richmond and more about what you do. I have been on your mailing list for a while, so it's really exciting. And so I want to mention here the importance of your calls to action. And that is that, there's an opportunity for me to make my voice heard. There's an opportunity for me to send something to my congressman, and kind of give him my perspective. And that's really important in changing legislation. Would you tell us more about that?
Sure thing, absolutely. So, again, when we work on policy on the state level, we
we work to try to make sure that we not only, again, represent the organization and the policy initiatives that we're currently working on, but that we're representing the needs and issues that people and their pets are facing. So we have a volunteer network of folks that are located throughout the state, and it's very important, whenever we have policy either coming up or moving through the legislature, that legislators want to hear from their constituents. We represent, obviously, our goals, and we want the best for animals as well, but a lot of times, and most importantly, legislators want to know how it affects them in their district and what they can do, and especially there are certainly times where maybe not so great policies arise, and it's important for our legislators to hear a variety of voices and hear what's important in their district. So that's where the action alerts come in, not only on a local, state, but also on the federal level, as you mentioned. But again, the importance of folks that are living, working, and caring for pets in their communities means a lot more to legislators most times when it comes up for a vote.
That's right. Well, say something about what you were telling me about the Virginia legislation cycle, that it's really slow and really short.
Yeah, in comparison to most states, it's pretty short.
Okay.
We have folks in the state director role all throughout the country, not necessarily one in every state, but every legislative session is different. Some last for years, some drag on for 2 years, and some are as short as Virginia. So we have essentially some years a 90-day window to work, the halls, and sometimes less. But with that being said, again, incorporating the voices of our volunteers, our shelter partners, and also our program people, we work throughout the year to develop those relationships, to vet our policy, again, to make sure that it's not only legal, that it will accomplish what we need it to accomplish, and that it will have a meaningful and lasting change, rather than just a blanket, looks good, feels good kind of policy. That's really not our move. But again, throughout the year, to make sure that we're meeting with folks when we're recognizable and we're being heard.
Well, it's so important because the law seems distant to many of us, but it really does impact things. So if somebody runs my cat over in the street, all my love, my child has been injured or killed. But in the eyes of the law, it's just property. He could have run over, a baseball, and it would be considered the same. So to say that is that the law is important. So leaning in is really important.
Sure, and also the interpretation. That's sometimes more important than I think the overall message is. Making sure that, again, our lawmakers understand what we're trying to accomplish, and quite often in a world where there's so many things, good and bad, sometimes catching our attention, and especially at the policy level, there's lots of things deemed more important. Again, the voices of constituents and the voices of organizations and groups is very important to make it known that that's what folks care about.
Yeah. Well, so obviously, responding to the action alerts, what other ways can people be involved in changing some of our legislation?
I think a lot of it is telling stories and sharing stories.
Okay.
We're obviously here with a very important story about one of our bill initiatives this past session, relative to Pet Inclusive Housing. And so many times our lawmakers and just the general community and other organizations are unaware unless they're affected. So telling the stories of the affected is most important. And again, we work with not only Fairfax County, but other shelters throughout Virginia to collect data, to understand why pets are being surrendered, look at funding challenges. And Jessica, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit more on maybe the specific housing issues, but again, awareness is key.
Great. Yeah, let's talk about some specific housing issues. I think we were already talking about some issues. I was affected, so many people are. Can you tell us?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the challenges that a lot of particularly renters in Virginia and across the nation face as a pet owner and a renter is access to housing that welcomes their pet without major restrictions. So data has shown that only about 8% of rental housing allows pets without those breed and weight restrictions, which is obviously insufficient compared to how many households in this country have pets, which is in the, I want to say 90 million range.
Yeah.
And so part of the challenge for a lot of families are pet fees. Those are largely unregulated. In Virginia, they definitely are. A lot of places charge upfront non-refundable fees.
Yeah.
They'll charge refundable deposits and sometimes couple those with a monthly pet rent. So there's a bunch of different ways that families are impacted when they're already facing housing insecurity and an affordability crisis in our rental market. There are also breed restrictions, weight restrictions, like Reasa said with Charlie here. I mean, the data has shown across the board that weight limits are relatively way too low. As a part of our work on the Virginia bill, we partnered with Fairfax County Animal Services to examine sort of the population of animals that are there and looking at Fairfax County Redevelopment Housing Authority's pet policies. We found in those affordable units, less than 24% allowed pets, and all of them had breeder weight restrictions. And then we looked at the Fairfax County's population, and 70% wouldn't fit into the weight requirements. So you're going to see this correlation between pet restrictions and having the need for relinquishment, and it having a disproportionate impact on lower income households, which is wildly unfair. And so we want to address that through policy, and I think it's important to do that when there are state dollars.
Yeah, very
play.
much so. Well, one of the impacts that were, I think a year or so ago, you did a presentation and really, was really detailed. And one of the impacts that I think people should care about is the impact on your tax dollar.
Yep.
Because the more animals that we need to take care of in the shelter and versus being in someone's loving home, that's a taxpayer's expense. Do we have stats on that we can talk about, or we'll show them later?
We did take a look at that.
Okay.
Reasa
We
might-
did, and for us, the cost of care for animals in a shelter environment is growing
Yeah.
every year because our veterinary costs are growing. The cost to food and for our staffing continue to grow. So it is absolutely a burden for the Fairfax County taxpayers to be taking care of these animals in a shelter when they could just be accommodated and cared for by the families that love them and want to keep them. But for these policies that keep families apart, and we hear from residents every single day who are struggling to keep their families together. And he's 6-year-old dog. He's been with his family since the beginning, since he was a puppy. And so, we see families that are really struggling. They want to keep their pet. They've had their pet since they were a baby, and are having to make these really hard decisions just because of policies that really are not working for our community. There's no data to show that certain dogs are more destructive than other dogs, or that certain breeds are more destructive or dangerous. And so, yet that's what these policies are based around flawed logic and science, and it is families like Sir Charles' family that are paying the price for that and not able to stay together. So, it's something that we're really happy to be partnering with Humane World and just bringing more awareness to it, because it's an issue that affects families. Most families in Fairfax County have a pet. And so it's not a minority, it's a majority of families. And we're also a community that is home to a lot of military families. And it's something when they come here to work at Fort Belvoir or one of the other installations, like the Pentagon, these families are struggling to find housing that supports their pets. So it's really a dynamic issue.
Yeah.
And one of the challenges we face in working in policy, not just in Virginia, and I know again Jessica can attest to it, but is amplifying the importance to our lawmakers. And understandably, they are bombarded daily with questions, concerns, and issues facing not only Virginians but across the country. And so they have to sort of prioritize what's worth moving forward and what they need to stop and take a closer look at. And of course, whenever money is involved, especially state dollars, we have to give grace that sometimes policy needs a finer look. And one thing that I think organizationally and with our teams, we've always been open to suggestions and ideas and sort of different ways to get to the goal. And again, that's where it's important to hear from folks that are facing these challenges. It's important to hear from other service organizations within our communities that are either providing resources or in need of resources for folks facing these challenges. We can't manufacture data per se, so it's important for us to have that and for folks to be in touch and in tune with our lawmakers so they know that this is a real issue.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some examples. I mean, can you say more about what his family situation was? Would that help us to know?
What we see with Charlie's family and with a lot of the larger dog families is that their dog, either they have housing and the dog gets too big and then their landlord says your dog is now too big for this housing, or they end up they have a breed of dog that, whether Pit Bull is the big one that's on the banned dog list, the breed restriction list for many apartments, and I've been working in animal welfare for 20 years, and if I had to breed identify a dog, I could not do it, right? We do dogs, I have no idea what breed he is. But so that's very arbitrary, obviously, to be banning dogs according to breed. And then what we're seeing is a lot of folks are struggling with the pet fees and the pet deposit. So that's cost prohibitive for many families, because as Jessica mentioned, they're not refundable. So even though you're paying these fees, you're not going to get that money back, even though your pet hasn't done anything. And what we also know is that our communities are better when we have pets, right? It's just when you look out your window and you see your neighbor walking a dog, the chances of you going up and talking to that neighbor are so much higher, right, than just going and approaching someone. So they just increase that neighborhood feel. It brings people together. I always love to say that. But pets are social lubricants, right? They just break down barriers. They bring us together in ways that is hard to even describe. So when we see our residents struggling with so many aspects of being able to hang on to their pet, we obviously, as an animal services provider, can't solve everything, but we've been fortunate to have Humane World for Animals in our corner and helping to raise this to a policy level, because it's something we have to have conversations with affordable housing. It's something we have to have conversations with private market housing. And come on, Charlie. Come on. Charlie's like, okay, you've talked enough. There we go. So it is a multifaceted issue and it's complex, but we're in it for the long haul because it's just so important that we develop some solutions so families can stay together with their pets.
Absolutely. Well, let's say a little bit more about some of the aspects of the legislation, because there were a number of things that were fascinating that you outlined with the DC law. One of them that was really interesting was the accommodation of insurance charges based on the level of pet. Are we anywhere near that in Virginia?
So that was originally a component of the bill. Because of the short legislative session, we didn't have time to work with all the stakeholders, so it got stripped out pretty early, but it's a very critical piece of the puzzle, the larger puzzle, so we do hope to address it at some point in the future. The bill this year focused on two different components, the first being addressing access to affordable housing. So it required that properties that accepted state financing allow pets without breed restrictions and with a minimum weight limit of 65 pounds. And that was to try and accommodate as many pets as possible. And they could, of course, set the limit higher, which would be our recommendation, but sort of starting the bar there and hopefully dispelling these myths that large dogs aren't appropriate for like apartment style housing, because that's not the case.
And one pet.
And it required at least one pet to be allowed. The second component focused on pet policy transparency. So similar to what Reasa was describing, part of the challenge for a lot of pet owners is just even identifying what housing is available to you. So while that first piece was really focused on the affordable housing space in the state, the second applied to all rental housing. So it said that if you have a property that you're advertising or up for rent, if you have a pet policy, that information needs to be available online if you have a website or in the application process, so that tenants don't get super far down, invest time, invest money, and then come to find out that that unit isn't appropriate for their family. So again, like looking at the Housing Authority and other sources of information like apartments.com, sometimes those pet policies don't line up. You'll see sort of broad descriptors like pets allowed, restrictions apply. You call, someone says we don't allow aggressive breeds. Fantastic, my breed isn't aggressive. That's not my experience. And then you come to find out when they meet your pet that, oh, it looks like we would classify it that way. And you've already wasted a bunch of time. So it really promotes transparency without that next step of saying you have to allow pets in all rental housing. I don't think we're quite there yet. So while that I think is an aspiration for us one day, it feels like a first reasonable step to just disclose more information, offer more transparency and market efficiency in the process.
Well, in this area, there are so many condos and high-rises being built, and they're tiny. You know, and I see people walking their dogs, but how do you get a dog like this in a 800-square-foot condo?
Well, in my experience, it can be. I mean, I think
I'm a cat person.
I think it really depends on the animal's own personal behavior and your interest in your lifestyle. So we've seen there's definitely no data to support that larger dogs can't be accommodated in smaller spaces. Some large dogs are couch potatoes and small dogs are louder and need more exercise. So what my recommendation would be is to, when you walk into your local animal shelter, to make sure that you're having in-depth conversations with those employees and that sort of interview process when you're getting to know a dog, to find out what style, what activity level that the animal has, so that it accommodates your lifestyle. Because if you're somebody who runs 6 miles a day and wants a dog that goes on hikes and does that, you're probably not going to want your couch potato, your tiny dog. And then dogs that have a lot of energy are perfect for you. If you're somebody who goes to work 10 hours a day and isn't in your unit, you probably would like a smaller dog or just a dog that's energy level is lower. So really working with the shelter to make sure that you find a good fit is
and one of the really interesting things that we've kind of sort of uncovered and have discussed a lot with working on this policy here in Virginia is, you have a lot of new high-rises, a lot of new multifamily or multi-use, I guess more to say, communities with retail, with parks, with amenities, and we have a lot of housing providers using those amenities as marketing. They have a dog park, they have walking trails, they have dog washing stations, and they market as pet friendly, which I think is absolutely wonderful. But then sometimes the pet policies that come in the fine print with some of the units, and it's not everyone, but they're sort of prohibitive to having essentially any type of pet. So looking at lifestyle, I think if you do have a larger dog, that those other opportunities for exercise and enrichment are also available. It's not just the size of the unit.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. So to look at the whole lifestyle around things, so that's really good. Well, We're very much coming to the close of something. So is there anything, any final thought, perhaps a question that I've asked and you wanted to answer something more, or something else that our viewers should know as next steps? And we've talked about some ways to get involved. So how can we get involved with adopting from the animal services?
Yes, so we have a wonderful website, Fairfax County Animal Services, and all of our animals are available on the website, including this big beefcake. And so we have every kind of breed, every kind of pet, and we have an open adoption policy. So you come in, as Jessica was referencing, we would love to talk to you about your lifestyle and your housing needs. And we have adoption counselors that work with you and make that match that's going to work for you and your family. And we also have a really interesting promotion. It's called an adoption audition, and so you can try out one of our pets for 5 days. And so we have found that most families that come adopt from us already have a pet, and so that allows that 5 days to just see how things go in a shelter, outside of the shelter and in your home environment. And so it's so easy. It's, in adopting a pet from an animal shelter, you're going to have the behavior background. It is going to be, all of our pets are completely vetted. They've had all their vaccinations. They're sterilized. And
you know what treats they like.
we know they have been well treated. We know a lot about them. And so, we also are there for our adopters, and we continue to provide support once the pet goes home. And so, we have counselors on hand and a behaviorist that are there to support you with that transition. So definitely check out our adoptable pets or come by for a visit, and we'd love to have anyone come by.
Well, thank you. Pets are not our whole life, but they make our lives whole and our families complete. Adapted from Roger Currier. I hope you've enjoyed our very special episode about Pet Inclusive Housing. Thank you for visiting my Pet Info Cafe, where the refills are bottomless and the love of pets is limitless. The cafe is closing now, so fill up, and I'll see you next time. In the meantime, you may visit Pet Info Cafe for more great information about pets.